Welcome back to the deep dive. So for our mission briefing today, we're going to be exploring a text that I think really sits at this fascinating and maybe sometimes uncomfortable intersection.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
place where technology and human vulnerability and just profound ethics, they all meet.
Right. And we're diving into this concept of designing for dignity.
Exactly. We're looking at the work of Lóng Tíng, analyzing his thinking on what he calls digital stewardship. And it's really about the true, enduring role of leadership when, that leadership has to confront these inevitable human moments.
Things like loss, grief, quiet memory.
Right. And all of this is happening within the very rigid, often unforgiving architecture of our digital systems.
Mhm.
It's about recognizing how these seemingly silent, purely technical choices that designers and executives make are actually shaping our most profound, our most personal human experiences online.
It's such a critical examination. I mean, this work, it really forces us to lift our gaze past the usual stuff, doesn't it? Past the shimmering metrics of the digital world,
Yeah, past speed, past disruption, all of it.
the quarterly growth reports.
Yeah.
And it makes us really analyze I guess you'd call it the ethical shadow that's cast by every single platform we rely on.
That's a great way to put it, an ethical shadow.
So our mission today is really to internalize what Lóng Tíng means when he suggests that leadership, especially in this digital space, it shouldn't be defined primarily by roadmaps,
Uh-huh.
but by moral posture.
I find that word posture to be so compelling because design, when it's functioning as it's intended to, it's almost entirely invisible.
Right, it just works.
It just
Yep.
works. You log in, the transaction completes, the scroll flows smoothly. We only become aware of the actual underlying architecture, the rules and the biases that are baked into the system when that rhythm is broken. As the text puts it, something breaks the rhythm. And that's when the smooth, friction-free experience just vanishes, and suddenly those underlying rules, the assumptions of the designers, they become so starkly, sometimes brutally visible.
And this is the moment we have to focus on. It's that moment, those moments of breakdown, these unexpected collisions between efficient systems and our messy humanity. They're crucial ethical flashpoints.
Flashpoints, I like that.
They're these rare instances when a system that was built for one thing, for velocity, for continuous movement, for constant engagement and mandatory updates, it suddenly, inexplicably, has to hold still.
And Lóng Tíng points to the most profound of these collisions, right?
He does. He says it's when grief enters a space that was never meant to stop.
Wow.
It's a space designed for transaction, not for reflection. And in that one moment of forced stillness, all the choices that were made in the architecture, how long data persists, who gets to see it, whether silence is even allowed, all of that reveals the system's deepest, most fundamental values.
It reveals its moral posture.
Exact.
So just to make sure I'm tracking this right, when the digital world stops operating efficiently, like when we try to memorialize someone online or when a digital community we relied on just vanishes, without warning, that's when the invisibility cloak drops. The design, which was supposed to be this neutral thing, is suddenly forced to decide. Does it help with the complex, inefficient human need to mourn or remember, or does it try to route around it?
Right. Does it see it as a bug in the system?
A bug that needs an automated patch.
Precisely. The system has to decide whether stillness is even permitted to exist. Can a space remain untouched, untroubled by this pervasive optimization impulse?
So if a page hasn't been updated in 5 years because it's a memorial, is that a failure? Or is it actually a success state of preservation?
And that distinction, that question right there, brings us to the core of it all. It's the question that really dictates the entire philosophy of digital stewardship. How do our digital systems fundamentally treat care itself?
And the distinction Lóng Tíng draws here is it's essential.
It is. Is care viewed as a problem to be solved, which means something to optimize away with a slick UI, a checklist, an automated response?
Get it done, move on.
Or is it recognized instead as a presence to be held? And that difference, that gap between a fixation on quick resolution and a tolerance for an enduring presence, that fundamentally separates ethical design from just cold efficiency engineering.
It dictates whether the human is the object of the system service.
Or just the fuel for its metrics engine.
That sets the stage perfectly. Let's really unpack this, starting with that immediate, almost defensive reaction Lóng Tíng notes he hears from platforms when they're held accountable. So the moment any major platform faces a serious ethical challenge, huge data breach, a privacy failure, how they handle a shared public tragedy, we almost always hear the same thing. The this highly sanitized defense delivered with such clinical precision, we are just a platform.
So clean,
Yeah.
technical, neutral.
Exactly. It's designed to suggest a total lack of agency. But why does Lóng Tíng assert that neutrality has never survived contact with loss?
Because the entire concept of neutrality is, well, it's a philosophical and an operational impossibility when you're dealing with human consequence. The claim of just a platform, it's an attempt to position the platform as a mere conduit,
Like a passive surface.
like a sidewalk where random things just happen. But the text argues that the very design of that sidewalk, the rules of engagement, the structure of the database, the priority the algorithms give to certain things, the choice of what data to keep and what to discard, all of that inherently shapes what's possible.
So it's not a sidewalk, it's more like a landscape architect designing a garden with specific paths and walls.
That's a much better analogy. It's an active shaper of reality.
And when loss, which is so chaotic and resistant to any structure, when that enters the equation, those subtle pre-existing choices, like a data retention policy, they stop being neutral technical specs
They become moral choices.
with real human impact.
Exactly. You're saying that the very decision not to design a feature, let's say, the choice not to build a robust, permanent digital archiving system for legacy user profiles, that is itself a design decision.
It's an act of creation by omission.
It is. So to claim you're neutral then is purely a tactic. It's rhetorical insulation. It's a way of deflecting responsibility for the immense power that you're already wielding through the architecture itself.
Right.
As the source states it so powerfully, to claim neutrality is to hide power, not to remove it.
And that hidden power dictates everything, the terms of engagement. It dictates whose memory gets to persist and whose just fades away. So by claiming neutrality, leadership is trying to insulate itself from the predictable, often tragic consequences that come directly from the core priorities they baked into the system from day one.
From the first line of code.
Yeah.
And we really have to dissect those core priorities because they are not prioritizing human dignity. They're not prioritizing stillness. They are systems built fundamentally for acceleration.
To move, consume, monetize data as fast as possible.
Right. And Lóng Tíng outlines these three clear imbalances that are just baked into the foundational architecture of most major platforms today.
Okay, let's detail those, because I think understanding them is understanding the systemic bias we all live under.
Okay, so first, they privilege speed over stillness, which makes perfect sense, for a system engineer to move data packets at light speed and deliver ads in milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
But it is fundamentally antagonistic to the human need for deep reflection or grief or historical preservation. Stillness is literally the antithesis of the system's primary directive.
Which is continuous movement and engagement.
Always.
And the second priority, which kind of fuels the first one, they prioritize growth over memory.
The imperative is always the next user, the next feature, the next round of funding, the next IPO. The system is entirely focused on onboarding, activation, and continuous acquisition.
Rather than the quiet, non-monetizable, inefficient task of just preserving the past.
Right. Memory, unless you can actively mine it to predict future behavior or feed some content velocity metric, is seen as technical debt. It's a liability.
And finally, the third one, which feels like the most corrosive imbalance when you're talking about human vulnerability, they prioritize optimization over care.
And care, by its very nature, is slow. It's labor-intensive, it's personal, it's resistant to being streamlined.
You can't A/B test care.
You can.
Yeah.
It demands unique attention, not generalized solutions. Yet, to the platform's logic, care is seen as friction. It's a point of resistance that slows down the transaction, and so it has to be smoothed away or automated out of existence.
So when these three imbalances are foundational, it means that certain negative outcomes aren't just unfortunate. They're not random failures.
They are structural necessities. The text makes that really powerful and sobering assertion. The consequences of loss we see online are decisions, not accidents.
And that is the core legal and ethical challenge of our age. We want to categorize these events as bugs, as unforeseen glitches, because that reduces the moral liability. But Lóng Tíng is insisting that no, these are systemic outcomes of pre-existing priorities.
Let's ground this with a concrete and pretty painful example. Think about the vanishing memorial.
Yeah.
The old website, the defunct social media group, the personal blog of a loved one that you used to visit, and then one day it's just gone.
It's a 404 error.
It's a 404 error on your memory. And when that memorial vanishes because a server is shut down or an old service is deprecated, it's not a failure of code. It's not a hardware failure. That is an outcome of priorities that were set long, long before the morning ever began.
Those priorities dictated data longevity based on profitability.
Exactly. On active usage, not on human meaning or sentimental value, the decision to decommission that server or sunset that service was made in a boardroom.
And it was based on a cost-benefit analysis that assigned what? A value of 0 to static, inactive human memory.
0. Or, consider the phenomenon where grief itself is moderated away. When a complex, emotionally charged exchange about loss is flagged and removed because it falls outside the predefined, hyper-efficient rules of engagement.
It doesn't fit the engagement metrics.
It's too slow, too negative, too non-transactional. That demonstrates the platform's active aversion to any human depth that isn't monetizable.
Grief is slow, it's non-transactional, and it often involves long periods of inactivity followed by these repetitive returns, like visiting a gravesite.
And all of those behaviors, they just drag down the engagement metrics that the system is designed to maximize.
So the system's focus on what converts and what moves metrics creates this truly corrosive environment for really essential human needs like remembrance and just pausing. If a feature or a data set isn't actively generating traffic or clicks or ad impressions, the economic logic of the system demands that it be retired or optimized or just deleted.
There's no line item for sentimental value on a balance sheet.
Not a single one.
And this is the great irony here. In their obsessive pursuit of maximum system utility, measured in clicks and transactions, these systems actively destroy essential human utility. Remembrance, reflection, these quiet moments. They are absolutely essential to our mental health, to cultural cohesion, to community resilience.
But because they don't produce a quantifiable, marketable value.
They're treated as waste or friction in the machine. The metrics define what matters, and if stillness and deep, slow grief aren't metric-friendly, well, they have to be discarded. It's the cost of metrics writ large.
Where the engine of growth is actively working against the human need for meaning that exists outside of productivity. This framing reveals a deep, almost philosophical conflict. The platform is designed to deny the human need for slowness. Okay, so that frames the problem perfectly. A system built for speed now has to confront things that resist speed. Let's pivot to the human side of this and how communities instinctively react. So this next section, it introduces the core resistance to this optimization mandate. And it's an intuitive truth, one that communities just seem to grasp immediately, but that system designers often overlook in their pursuit of technical perfection. And the critical observation is this triad. Care cannot be automated, grief cannot be streamlined, and perhaps most radically in a digital context, memory does not scale.
That triad of non-scalability, it forms the moral backbone of genuine human interaction, and it is a direct confrontation to the whole Silicon Valley ethos where everything must scale to achieve dominance.
Right, if it doesn't scale, it's a hobby.
Exactly. But grief and care are defined by their inefficiency, by their lack of a smooth process flow. They require specific, localized, often non-repeatable acts of just being present. They resist generalization, and they refuse the template.
And this leads to a really intuitive human need, the resistance to productive utility in moments of care. We understand this in the physical world, right? We maintain monuments, we preserve ancient ruins or historical homes that are economically useless.
They cost money to maintain.
Yeah, they generate no immediate ROI, but they are culturally and personally essential. We return to places that no longer serve a functional purpose.
Absolutely. The decision to let something remain unfinished, quiet, unproductive, is a profound moral act in a world that is obsessed with completion and utility. A digital space designed for ruthless efficiency will constantly be prompting you.
Next action, next update, next contribution.
All the time. But the human need in moments of profound meaning, especially loss, is often the exact opposite, to let it sit untouched as a fixed marker of what was. This act of stillness, of deliberate non-action, is a profound form of resistance against the constant demand for forward momentum.
And Lóng Tíng really highlights how digital spaces, or any meaningful spaces really, they gain their depth and their sanctity precisely because nothing happened there anymore. That is such a powerful, almost spiritual counter-narrative to the endless stream of updates and notifications and engagement prompts that we are conditioned to expect today.
It's the intentional absence of action that confers the meaning. No progress, no updates, just presence and the potential for a quiet, private return. The value of that space is generated by the fidelity of the memory it holds.
Not the velocity of new content it generates.
Exactly. When a digital memorial page or an old forum thread remains static for a decade, its meaning actually deepens because it stands as a fixed point against a constantly moving digital stream. It becomes a sanctuary.
A sanctuary of permanence in a sea of flux. And permanence, to the logic of the maximizing, optimizing machine, is the enemy. It's a cost center.
Exactly. This deep human need for stillness is deeply uncomfortable for systems built entirely on velocity and optimization. And why? Because the metrics-driven system interprets stillness as wasted potential.
It's a failure to convert.
A failure to convert attention into engagement, which translates into revenue. So the system automatically tries to fix it. It tries to repair the malfunction of inactivity by demanding interaction, by pushing new content, or eventually by erasing it. Because non-production is fundamentally interpreted as a failure of the system's core design mandate.
It's like an existential discomfort for the algorithm. If something is quiet, if it's unproductive, the system senses a deviation from its ideal state and tries to repair it by forcing interaction or injecting new shiny features. This is why platforms are always undergoing these mandatory disruptive updates, this constant mandate that nothing can simply be in a state of quiet permanence.
And if you dig into the technical side for a moment, the system's survival really does rely on continuous movement and novelty. The cost of maintaining static, non-monetizable data is real. Storage costs money.
Developer time.
Maintenance of legacy code for an old memorial costs developer time, and that time has an opportunity cost. So to allow for true stillness, to allow a digital space to become a quiet, non-productive memorial, is to deliberately undermine the economic engine that funds the whole platform.
So allowing for care and memory demands a deliberate and often very expensive ethical choice from leadership.
Yes, it requires defying the very logic of the optimization mandate that got them where they are in the first place.
So the system is designed to be restless, and we are demanding that leadership override that fundamental design impulse. That leads us directly into the really radical redefinition of leadership that Lóng Tíng proposes. When we talk about leadership in digital spaces, the vocabulary is, it's typically dominated by innovation, speed, disruption. Who can launch the fastest, disrupt the most established market, achieve the biggest scale? It's all about accelerating the future.
That traditional definition of digital leadership is about action, iteration, rapid movement. It's defined by these aggressive roadmaps and, quarterly velocity.
Right.
Lóng Tíng completely flips this paradigm. He presents a radical counterargument that feels deeply rooted in Asian philosophical traditions, where mastery often means knowing when to stop.
Which is?
The most ethical form of leadership is restraint.
Restraint. That is not a term you hear on stage at a major tech conference.
Not at all.
It sounds so passive, almost counterintuitive to the entire ethos of building and growing. If innovation is about what you do, what exactly does this ethical restraint look like in practice?
Well, it's not passive. It's an active non-intervention. It's a form of highly conscious, deliberate negation. It's knowing when not to optimize a process that handles vulnerable human data. It's knowing when not to intervene, simply because you have the technical power and the financial motivation to do so. And critically, it's the conscious, difficult decision to leave something alone because touching it would erase what makes it matter.
So for a CEO or a senior product lead, that means looking at an old, clunky, poorly optimized, but deeply meaningful piece of code or data structure.
Like an early chat archive or a database of a community that long since moved on.
And saying, we will not update this. We will not integrate it into our new, sleek framework. We will just preserve it in its native, messy state.
And that preservation, that restraint, it comes at a direct, tangible cost that challenges the entire financial model of the digital world. The text points out that this kind of restrained leadership, it rarely looks impressive.
You don't get headlines for not launching a feature.
Never. Let's detail the real, unavoidable friction points and costs, because this is where the theory hits operational reality.
Okay, let's start with the one that most affects developers and infrastructure teams, technical debt.
The first tangible cost is time, which is developer time, which is money. Preservation is inherently slow. Maintaining legacy systems, an old API, an unused database, purely for the sake of preserving meaning, creates immense technical debt.
And that means developer hours have to be spent making sure that these non-optimized static systems don't break the faster, newer parts of the architecture.
And that time could have been spent on new, revenue-generating features. The leadership of restraint chooses to pay this ongoing maintenance cost of the past.
Okay, and second, it costs clarity. I mean, in the pursuit of a unified, seamless user experience, platforms trying to sanitize everything.
And restraint sacrifices that clean, unified experience.
Yeah.
An untouched digital memorial space might be clunky, non-standardized, or visually jarring against a clean new UI. Restraint demands that leaders accept this visual and architectural messiness. It means saying, we will tolerate an inconsistent user interface here, because consistency would require us to erase the historical integrity of this space.
So the decision to preserve the past means accepting a fragmented experience, and that feels like poor design to a lot of modern product managers.
It does. And the third and most direct cost, it costs money, pure, non-recoupable financial resources.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you look at the economics of cloud computing, every piece of storage, every redundant server instance is a cost center. To preserve millions of static, inactive memorial profiles, for example, is to accept a continuous financial drain for non-productive output.
So when a platform is forced to decide between maintaining an archive that costs, say, $10 million a year to run versus shutting it down to save money.
The ethical choice of restraint defies all conventional financial advice.
So if I'm playing devil's advocate here, which a board member certainly would be, isn't this radical restraint just a failure to innovate? If you don't iterate quickly, if you refuse to optimize every corner of your architecture, won't you just be outpaced by competitors who do embrace speed and efficiency? This sounds like a mandate for obsolescence, not ethical longevity.
And that is the core conflict. Lóng is not ignorant of the market reality. The leader practicing restraint has to learn to justify this choice using a different form of currency. They have to argue that they're not sacrificing innovation, they're shifting the side of value creation from velocity to fidelity.
So you might lose a small percentage of speed.
But you gain a profound form of competitive advantage, non-fragile trust.
Let's talk about that payoff. Because if it costs so much and looks so unimpressive, what is the actual measurable return on investment for the leadership that practices this?
Restraint builds something far more fragile and far more important: trust. Digital trust is incredibly brittle today. It's constantly being eroded by mandatory changes, opaque data handling, and this pervasive sense that platforms view their users' emotional history as disposable inputs for the next cycle of growth. Trust is built not when the system works perfectly, but when the user believes that the system, even when it is inefficient, respects their long-term well-being and memory more than its own short-term profit metrics.
So if the system demonstrates that it will protect the memory of your loved one or the history of your community, even when that memory yields zero immediate return for the platform, that's a powerful, profound, non-monetizable act of trust building.
Yeah.
It signals to every user, living and dead, that the leaders are acting as stewards, not merely as extractive owners.
And the durability of that trust becomes the real measure of ethical architecture. If a user feels that their moment of deepest vulnerability, their grief, their history, their personal data will be exploited or erased the moment it stops being useful or profitable, that trust is shattered instantly.
So restraint is the active decision to keep a promise to the user that transcends quarterly results.
It's an investment in ethical longevity. And
Right.
over the long term, that translates into the most valuable asset in the digital age: brand fidelity that can withstand a crisis.
That reframes the cost entirely. It's not just a negative cost, it's an investment in a different kind of equity. By accepting the technical cost of maintaining legacy clutter, you are gaining immense ethical clarity and trust equity. That connection between design choices and morality leads us straight into this really powerful assertion that elevates design from just a technical discipline to an ethical one. Design is moral architecture, whether it admits it or not. Every system intrinsically teaches its users how to behave, what the rules are, and what the true fundamental values of its creators actually are.
The system is, in effect, an active, continuous moral educator. It teaches people what's rewarded.
Speed, outrage, novelty.
Right. It teaches what is tolerated.
Superficial engagement.
And it teaches what is ignored.
Slow reflection, deep complexity.
So if a system is built to reward velocity, it teaches us that slowness is a sin. If it's built to reward the creation of new content, it teaches us that old content is disposable.
Let's break down the comparative analysis Lóng Tíng provides of these moral lessons systems in part. What's the fundamental difference in the behavior taught by a system built for dignity versus one built for disposability?
Okay, so teaching dignity. That happens when a system allows a place, a memorial page, an old forum, an untouched comment thread, to remain untouched even when nothing is gained from it.
Mm-hmm.
This teaches the user that inherent meaning exists independent of utility and profit. It's a quiet, powerful moral statement that says, we value your experience and your memory even if we can't actively monetize it right now.
And that builds a cultural sense of permanence and respect.
It does. Conversely, the systems that teach disposability are those that constantly erase the past to make room for the new.
These systems train users to view their own inputs, their personal history, and potentially the digital history of their communities as temporary and replaceable.
And that behavior reinforces the mindset of constant, aggressive optimization and a total lack of permanence. It's the digital equivalent of perpetual urban renewal, where every historical landmark is wiped out for a shinier, more profitable structure.
Erasing the context and complexity of history in the process.
Exactly. And that destructive impulse, the impulse to erase the past for the convenience of the present architecture, that leads to a crucial reframing of the design challenge itself. Lóng Tíng is very clear here. The goal is not fixing grief.
Right.
Design does not need to fix grief. It needs to stop erasing it. Grief is not a broken feature that requires an algorithm or a patch or a three-step guide to recovery. It's a fundamental, enduring human state.
That is a vital distinction because we are so immersed in a culture that seeks to fix, solve, and move on. Digital culture especially has this inherent love of endpoints.
Fixes, updates, resolutions, expiration dates.
Everything has to be closed, solved, archived, or finalized because an open, unresolved state is viewed as inefficient.
Because the continuous non-resolved state is perceived by the machine as a state of inefficiency or error that's demanding resources. But human loss fundamentally resists that demand for closure.
The source states it so bluntly, loss does not resolve.
It changes, it integrates into your life, but it doesn't end like a software installation or a completed transaction. So if the system demands closure, it is denying the user's reality.
Therefore, the text suggests the most ethical and human gesture for digital design is sometimes to just allow something to remain open, to resist the architectural mandate for closure and neatness.
Yes. To allow a digital space to exist without purpose, without roadmap, and without expiration date. And this is where the human need clashes most deeply with the system's design logic.
Because for the person mourning, that open, untouched digital space is a place of profound meaning. It's a fixed point to return to.
But for the system, it's a liability, an anomaly, a persistent error message demanding resolution and resources.
It becomes the digital equivalent of an open wound, but kept ethically open as a gesture of respect and fidelity rather than aggressively sutured shut for the sake of systemic efficiency.
It's an affirmation of the user's reality that some things simply don't have a clean resolution and that the platform respects that reality.
By allowing that open state, the design takes a powerful moral position.
It says the human dignity and the necessary complexity of memory outweigh systemic neatness and optimization. And this requires a radical act of humility from the designers, the humility to accept that their system is not capable of solving the deepest human problems.
Only of holding space for them.
Only holding space.
That shift in mindset from trying to solve a problem to simply accepting the burden of presence is the entire crux of this argument. So if the issue isn't a missing feature and the solution isn't some new product line, what is actually required for designing for dignity? Lóng Tíng summarizes that it requires a fundamental philosophical shift in stance.
Not just new features or some superficial ethical overlays. And this stance shift is the ultimate takeaway for leadership in this decade. It's not about changing the features. It's about changing the fundamental relationship the platform has with its users and with its content.
So it's a philosophical, operational, and deeply ethical transition.
It fundamentally redefines the purpose of the organization.
Okay, let's systematically break down the required transition. The text defines 3 key philosophical shifts for leadership. What's the first, most crucial step?
The first, and arguably the foundation for everything else, is the shift from owner to steward.
Okay.
The owner views the data, the platform, the community, the user's presence as assets, things to be exploited, monetized, or controlled for maximal growth and profit.
But the steward?
The steward views these things as something entrusted to their care, with a fiduciary responsibility that extends beyond profitability. The steward is focused on preservation, not extraction.
That shifts the balance of power entirely. And if I'm tracking, the second shift is a recognition that the platform can't just hide behind technical jargon.
Exactly. The second shift is from neutrality to presence. We established that neutrality is a myth, an active camouflage for power. The shift to presence means acknowledging the inherent power that design wields and actively accepting the moral and social responsibility that comes with shaping human experience, especially around vulnerability.
So it means being present, not just technically, but ethically. And finally, the operational shift that really affects the bottom line. The shift from efficiency to care.
This is the practical commitment. It recognizes that optimization, while crucial for scaling infrastructure and serving billions of requests, must yield. It must actively and deliberately retreat when confronted with the non-scalable, non-monetized requirements of human care and dignity.
So it means accepting inefficiency as a necessary cost of doing ethical business. It means creating budgets for non-productive maintenance.
It does.
So when we talk about digital stewardship, we need a concrete definition. What does this look like in practice, linking back to that radical idea of restraint? If I'm a steward product manager, how does my morning meeting change?
It changes everything. Stewardship is an active, protective posture. Operationally, it means holding space without claiming it. This involves allowing communities or memorial spaces to exist without dictating the terms of their memory or instantly turning that space into another metric pool for optimization.
So a steward might design an archive that is intentionally difficult to interact with for the average user.
But perfectly preserved for those who need to return to it.
Yes. It also must mean fundamentally changing the relationship with the data itself.
It does. It means protecting memory without exploiting it, ensuring the past remains accessible and intact, rather than constantly mining it for new behavioral data, new engagement triggers, or new content velocity metrics. A steward accepts that data has an intrinsic value to the user that far, far outweighs its extractive value to the platform.
And most difficult of all, I think, stewardship requires accepting that some digital spaces matter precisely because they no longer produce anything. They're silent.
Yes.
They're preserved not for what they can do, but for what they represent to the human heart.
And that acceptance is the hallmark of the steward leader. The steward understands that an old, quiet, unused digital artifact is not dead weight on the balance sheet. It is a repository of shared meaning that justifies its continued existence simply by being there for those few who need to return to it.
They see the cost of maintenance as a fee paid for ethical integrity.
That's it exactly.
This changes how we measure success and true leadership entirely. Lóng Tíng concludes the argument by presenting the true test of leadership in the digital decade ahead. And he says it will not be how fast platforms evolve, because velocity is cheap.
No, the essential measure of ethical leadership will be what they choose not to erase along the way. The speed of evolution is easy to track. New features, user growth, quarterly earnings. The ethical measure is slower, it's far more subtle, and requires a careful examination. What did they decide was important enough to leave untouched, unoptimized, and non-monetized, simply because it held human dignity?
That leads to the final, quiet responsibility of design, which is such a profound paradox in our age of infinite connectivity. The most important digital places, paradoxically, are often the ones where nothing happens anymore.
Where no metrics move, where no growth occurs, and yet someone is remembered. And this quiet responsibility is the ultimate refutation of the optimization mandate. It is not, as the technical team might categorize it, a failure of design.
It's the highest expression of design.
It is,
Yeah.
because it is design serving humanity at its most vulnerable, rather than serving the machine at its most relentless. It is the architectural practice of compassion. #tag outro.
This has been a profound exploration, moving from the invisible hand of design all the way to the radical, necessary defense of restraint. The core insight is that the default technological priorities, speed, optimization, growth, have direct, corrosive, moral impacts on our most essential human experiences like grief and memory. And that shift from owner to steward, characterized by radical restraint and ethical presence, is the central path toward designing for dignity.
And the essential takeaway for you, the learner, is this. Digital systems are not neutral. They are moral educators and architects. If you are assessing the ethics of a platform or a design choice, or even the underlying culture of a company, look carefully at what it allows to be quiet, untouched, and unproductive.
Because that's where its true unstated values reside.
Exactly. A system's true character and its ethical fitness for humanity are revealed precisely in those moments when it is asked to stop, to hold still, and to simply hold space.
So as we wrap up, here is a provocative thought for reflection, something for you to mull over as you navigate your own digital and professional life, building on this idea of radical restraint.
Mm.
What structures in your own life, whether they're professional processes you manage or personal spaces you maintain, are built purely for speed and efficiency? And what would it cost you in terms of time or clarity or money to practice the kind of radical, non-productive restraint that Lóng Tíng describes, allowing for a sacred space of non-purpose that builds genuine, enduring trust?
Consider the immense value of deliberately allowing something to remain quiet, untouched, and unfinished.